evening, everyone. Good evening from Cairo. Welcome to the BUE Research Centre for Irish Studies Research Seminar. This evening, our seminar is titled Governance of the Pandemic, Theory, Practice and Dilemmas. Our guest speaker is Professor Ibrahim Sirkeci, and our moderator is Dr. Zeinab Younis. Before I start, I'd like to give a special thank you to the Faculty of Business Administration, Economics and Political Science at the British University in Egypt, and to the Research Centre for Innovation, Governance and Green Economy for collaborating with us on this research seminar. Our moderator this evening, Dr. Zeinab Shawky Younis, is an Associate Professor of Public Administration at the Faculty of Business Administration, Economics and Political Science at the British University in Egypt. She's also the Director of the Research Centre for Innovation, Governance and Green Economy. Professor Zeinab will be given an opportunity to introduce herself fully and her research interests, but for now, her research areas of interest are leadership, organizational behavior, and the new public management policies and practices. Dr. Zeinab, the floor is yours.
Hello, Dr. Rania. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I would like to thank first and most our faculty, Business Administration, Economics and Political Science under the supervision of our top management for allowing this opportunity and for supporting and encouraging those kinds of online platforms for seminars. I would like to thank you in person in your capacity as a director of the BUE Research Centre for Irish Studies, for composing and for doing the effort of inviting such renowned guest speakers to the platform of BUE. I would very quickly introduce myself, then I will introduce my honorable guest speaker today. My name is Zeinab Shawky Younis. I'm an Associate Professor of Public Administration, as you stated, in the Business Department at the Faculty of BAPS at BUE. And I'm the Director of the Research Centre for Governance, Innovation, Governance and Green Economy. I'm also the coordinator of the International Aspect Committee in the Business Department. And last and not least, I belong to BUE, a very special place that I always call home. And my research areas are highly focused on leadership, organizational behavior, partially linking industry to academia as a core of my public administration specialization. Today, we are very honored to have this collaboration. And I think that teamwork and collaboration is one of the icons for BUE staff members. They always collaborate to bring the best of the best. And today, our guest speaker is Professor Ibrahim Sirkeci, the British Turkish management scientist, Professor of Transnational Studies and Marketing at the European Business School in London Regent University, the Director of the Research Centre for Transnational Studies with more than 3,475 citations. I know, and I've done a bit of research, Professor Ibrahim, and I would like you to correct me when in anything I'm not saying in particular, and you will have the chance in a few seconds for the floor. You started at the University of Sheffield, and you edited the work of migration and remittances during a global financial crisis. You conducted research in UK, Germany, Turkey, and Iraq, often collaborating with international research teams and research centers. You're chairing the Turkish migration conferences in 2014, and you chaired the Future of Transnational Educational Forum. Your latest book, published by Springer on 2013, was on the transnational marketing and transnational consumers. And back in 2005, you were a research fellow at the Center of Study of Ethnicity and Citizenship in the University of Bristol. And one of your famous quotes, which would go aligning today with our amazing seminar under the title of The Governance of the Pandemic, Theory and Practice and Dilemmas, actually, was that migration is not a solitary process. It isn't about a mover, where he or she goes. So migration is about security and escaping dangerous situation. And when we speak about dangerous situations, we speak about crises and we speak about crisis management. And COVID-19 as a pandemic, I guess that's the name of the game nowadays. That's the new normal. Everybody is living and trying to cope around with. Therefore, I would leave the floor for you to introduce yourself, Professor Ibrahim Sirkeci, and we are extremely honored to have you today with us on BUE online platform. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Zainab and Rania. And thank you very much for this extremely exaggerating introduction. I am nowhere near that good of any good, if I am. Thank you for the invitation as well. It is really a pleasure to be with you this evening. I was confused about the time at the beginning, but now we are also in the summertime. So I think the time difference is only 1 hour between Cairo and London. So that's a good thing to have. Turkey changed their time zones like a couple of years ago. Now every time it's like 3 hours, although it is at the same line with Cairo. Anyway, so one thing to correct, Zainab, is I left my job at Regent's University London at the end of February. So I was a bit of COVID casualty in this regard. Now I am working for 4 different British universities, Coventry University and Edinburgh Napier University, on a part-time basis on each of them. And I am mostly supervising PhD students, DBA students, and MBA students. So not really teaching on a day-to-day basis anymore. And I have, obviously COVID changed, everybody's life, and we as scientists, researchers, we felt the responsibility as well early on. And I also joined the bandwagon and, started studying COVID from January 2020 onwards. And probably we have published the first ever peer-reviewed article on COVID and migration last year in April. And later on in October, we have also published a book on COVID and human mobility. So practically looking at what will happen to migration and migrants and migration governance around the world during and after COVID. This was the main question for all of our contributing authors, and covering pretty much a very wide disciplinary geography, I should say. And it stands to be tested, of course, what we argue in those, those little pieces of research. And today I will stray a little bit from migration, which is my main subject area. I've been doing, probably 80% of my CV is dominated by migration research. The rest is divided between marketing and some political science maybe, but it is mostly about migration and population change. This is probably what I was meant to be as a researcher or academic. So the title of this this session was Governance of the Pandemic. And it is obviously a very appropriate and topical thing to discuss, perhaps with a nuance. Maybe we should say bad governance, because over the last 15 months or 14 months since Chinese identified the infection in the city of Wuhan, we have plenty of examples, plenty of cases of bad governance from around the world, and without really distinguishing or discriminating against any type of governments or geography in this sense. I would like to share my screen now so we can continue with a bit of a visual I have prepared for this meeting. And what we have here is, I hope you can see my screen. If
Yes,
somebody
perfect.
cannot, yes, that's good. So we are on. And I should start with the background of this background. I mean, I chose this background because when it comes to such disasters, actually, when it comes to any cross-border challenge, including migration, we are, and as humans and countries, regions, we are like these dots. We are connected. We are not independent of any other dot in the map. So COVID obviously showed this, once again, and perhaps a bit boldly, and perhaps unfortunately too, because I think the total number of death now is well over 1 million around the world, and it reached, again, if you can really trust the numbers, registers, and statistics, it reached around 130,000 in the UK alone. So that is important to remember. We are not disconnected. We are not independent, and we will never be independent in this world. And perhaps we should also remember we were never independent as such. I mean, interdependency has more currency than independence. Although we know every other country is celebrating their independence days and whatever, but it is more or less a joke because we are more interdependent than independent in any case and against any challenge. And COVID is not an exception. So let's remember what we have seen, with COVID. I mean, obviously, we have seen a lot of that, and early January, it is interesting enough. I was in China last December. I mean, December 2019, before COVID, broke. And I flew from China to Istanbul, and then from Istanbul to Iraq. Then I flew again to Istanbul, twice actually, and of course, back and forth to London too. So I probably have a little bit credit there, spreading the virus, in those geographies. It's not a crime. It wasn't a crime when I was traveling, so I can escape from that bit. But the virus obviously started long ahead of January 23, 2019, because Chinese government, obviously health authorities, released those notes as early as October 2019, indicating some interesting, extraordinary moves in the virus world, if we can say. And there were unknown or unexplained, cases and infections and so on. So again, early December, they released very strong, signals, and they were all indicative of some kind of SARS similar COVID was coming. And if I'm not mistaken, by 12th of January, it was known there is a new virus. It was a new coronavirus, and that was confirmed. And a few days later, they shared with the world the DNA of the virus. And by 23rd of January, they shut down the city of Wuhan, and later on the whole state of Hubei. Why I'm telling you this? Because it is important to recognize when you look at what happened afterwards, all these early moves are indicative of something. So China was the first country to recognize the virus, and they reacted according to some Western liberal thoughts authoritatively, and they locked down the country, a part of the country. And again, you can say a country because that Hubei province is about 60 million population, so it is bigger than most European countries, if not all. So, I mean, this can be heavy-handed, but they considered it necessary. And of course, when you compare, what was a Chinese lockdown to what is a British lockdown, we are not looking at the same thing. British lockdown was a mere advice. Our government told people we should stay indoors if we can, but we can go out to walk our dog, we can travel 400 miles to visit our grandparents, if you don't tell anybody, even if you are the advisor to the prime minister. So, and Chinese lockdown is not the same thing. When you are locked down, you are locked down. You can't get out of your house. End of the story. And so I will relate to this later conspiracy theories. Chinese created this and they did that, blah, blah. I mean, don't get yourself fooled, because if you have that kind of a lockdown, you can really control the virus. If nobody is really getting out, then you can control. And again, if you remember, about 2 months later, 2 months after the lockdown, full lockdown, Chinese managed to test everybody in the city. Every single individual got tested. So if you do that again, you have a chance to contain the virus. So if you can identify every infected person, then you can treat them or at least isolate them. So rest of the population can be back to normal, whatever that would be. But that is what the Chinese case taught us and should be teaching us, actually. Although we know there are wonderful leaders around the world, there were some more earlier in the year, and they have blamed China doing this, doing that, it was Chinese virus. So don't get fooled with this. Because when you look around that region, you will also see which countries control the virus better. Japanese did really well. They limited the number of infected cases to a very bare minimum. Taiwanese, again, another Chinese government with more liberal tendencies, they managed to control it very well. Singapore did well. Hong Kong did well. Of course, South Korea did extremely well. We don't have any data about it, but North Korea should definitely have done very well. They probably beat the virus twice over before even it emerged. But New Zealand did really well. We know that they had very small numbers and, they recovered quickly. And the common denominator here is, one can say, okay, these are relatively authoritarian governments. They did, so and so. But main denominator was they reacted early. They reacted very early. They applied the lockdown measures more or less, strictly. And that was the main story of how they controlled the spread of the virus and, of course, negative adverse effects of the virus. On the other hand, we have other countries, you have seen a lot of wonderful people around the world, like those on the screen. Boris Johnson, who said, yeah, it will just go away. And 3 weeks later, he got infected himself. He was hospitalized for about 2 weeks. And luckily, he got recovered. And again, luckily, he was one of the early ones who got the job, the vaccine. Donald Trump, the story, he refused to accept the virus. Then he claimed it is Chinese. Then he refused to accept he was sick. Then he was sick and taken to hospital. Then, he lost the election and he refused that he lost the election. He's the trademark for the guy, but the story. And of course, in the meantime, what was happening is that, last photo you see here, especially those, vulnerable populations, children, elderly, women, immigrants, refugees, whoever falls under that category, were hit hardest in this crisis. And denying the presence of such virus or its effects was simply denying, governing the situation. And this is why I started talking about bad governance, why it is critical. And of course, apart from these guys, you know, like Turkish president, he was quite reluctant early on, and Turkey became pretty reluctant to release reliable numbers about, you know, infections, deaths, and it is one of the countries, unfortunately, who is not happy with statistics and the science of statistics and registers. Similar things we have seen coming from Brazil. Bolsonaro did similar antiques. He even claimed that he has an athletics background, so he can defeat the virus. And as we know, he got infected too. So that is probably the good news about the virus. The virus is a little bit indiscriminate. So rich or poor, powerful or not, athletic or not, you know, it can damage you one way or another. But unfortunately, we also know as researchers of inequalities, insecurities, we also know, unfortunately, it affects those without power, in any sense of power, more than others. And I will share with you few more details and quotes so um, we can think about it. I mean, of course, you know, was or is this inevitable? Was that inevitable that we lost more than 1 million lives to COVID? My humble opinion, and probably many thousands of researchers from around the world can join, it wasn't inevitable. At least, you know, a significant chunk of these infections and death toll could have been avoided if the science's advice followed. Like in the UK, we know there were calls for lockdown much earlier than 23rd of March. That is exactly 2 months later than Chinese, by the way. But in the meantime, instead of doing the right thing, we just preferred to blame China for not doing their thing. So that was just simple bad governance. And there are now so many reports from around the world, from think tanks, from universities, from even government agencies, indicating one thing: the biggest risk and cause for disaster, not only for this disaster, but any disaster, is bad governance. End of the story. So avoiding the reality will not get us anywhere. It is like, you know, not, you know, collecting the correct data, accurate, you know, statistics about anything. It will not move you forward. I mean, you may hide it from the public, but at least you should collect it properly and use it, you know, properly. So that will help you. If you, I mean, there could be very few cases why you should hide the information from public anyway. But unfortunately, there are quite a few, maybe a bit more, governments in the world that, you know, they prefer doing that. I mean, early on in February, March, we started working on estimating the spread, you know, speed of spread, disease, how it will be dispersed around the world. So what we have done with a colleague of mine from Ankara University, we have looked at the travel data from Wuhan and Hubei province and China overall, to and around the world, actually, various, you know, locations identified. Then we have kind of like projected that onto mutual migration, you know, flow data, which is pretty much estimations created by World Bank. Again, you know, you may not say, you know, this is the best data you can, you know, rely and trust, but it is the best available data you can use. And anyway, it is indicative of general trends. So you can see quite a few facts looking at that data. And we did so. We have come up with equations, how you can estimate the potential number of, you know, infections in a given location by looking at their connection to a particular origin place of origin. That was Wuhan at the time. We are talking about February, March, you know, last year. So there were very few cases in the world at that time, and yet we have calculated, you know, a rate, like what would be the rate of spread. And if these were, for example, taken on board and effective measures put in place, particularly those places having a traffic with the place of origin, we would have been in a much better position now, and much smaller number of deaths covering around the world. So we did that study and we linked it to migration data. As you can guess, I mean, it is obviously relevant. I mean, it is either migration of humans or migration of birds. It is coming from bats, we know that, and it is transmitted to humans via another animal. So, I mean, we know birds migrate, we know people migrate, and people's migration is pretty much uncontrollable. And this is why we have so many millions of irregular migrants around the world. And birds migration is unequally, at an exponential scale, uncontrollable. So only thing you can do is follow the migration flows and take precautionary measures to control or do something about it. But forget about that kind of detailed, targeted strategies. Many governments did not even take it seriously and let it run riot for months and months. I mean, UK was probably in the second category of countries in terms of lockdowns, but there were many countries didn't do any lockdowns until April, in May, and until even June. There were a few countries, as far as I know, they refused it totally, like Belarus. They decided to fight the virus by not locking down anybody. I hope they manage. We don't have statistics about what happened to them. Probably they don't even have that either. So how we define where we are looking at in bad governance? And Daniel Kaufman from Brookings Institute, in a recent article, this was like halfway through the crisis last year, they looked at the governance quality, government effectiveness, and they linked it to infected numbers. So the left-hand side of the graph here showing us government effectiveness, and the higher the governance effectiveness, it means higher the rate of, percentage of people got tested. Probably we would see similar kind of graphics if we put countries into that kind of a scale again regarding vaccinations. We will come at, at a similar picture. So there's a simple message here. More effective governance, better you deal with such crisis. It is obvious here. The second part of the graph, right-hand side part of the graph here, is showing us the control of corruption. So, of course, the sub note here is you can't avoid corruption. It will be always there, but you can control it. So what we are looking at is the higher the level of corruption in a country means lower the efficiency of cautions, measures taken against such virus or any similar disasters. So what they are referring to here is, you see this word capture. Capture means practically corruption. That is probably like you can think of a systematic corruption. So a group of people, a group of stakeholders controls the government, controls the policies for improving, progressing their own interests. But it could be, often it is against the public interest, so not for the common good. So that is still, we are talking about corruption in a much deeper scale. And of course, leadership challenges, you can guess what it means. And good leaders are are not the ones like Trump or Bolsonaro or Boris Johnson to that effect. And then there were a few other reports, and I picked some of them. These are pretty much reflective of overall feeling. But the accountability is important. So accountability, of course, good accountability, effective accountability can only be achieved if you can have accurate, statistics and registers. So, and accurate registers of actions too, policies too. Who is benefiting from what? But apparently, over the last maybe 6 months, we have seen that shifted to China, like, accusing China of not doing enough, controlling the pandemic, etc., and not letting United Nations agencies to do inspections and so on. And these are, of course, all political games at a different scales. But it is not only Chinese accountability. We need accountability for all governments, for all countries. I mean, it is China at the end of the day, don't forget, have probably the lowest number of deaths, in the world, both in absolute numbers and also pro rata. I mean, so what happens to our government, I mean, UK government or US government or Brazilian government or Italian government? So you should probably eradicate all these governments to cure the problem. But that is important. Many countries didn't do enough. Many countries delayed their responses, and many countries were not prepared, despite having the resources. So that is practically crime. I mean, if in any line of business, if you do that, it will be at least negligence. So you will be punished for that. But of course, there were those other countries too. Those countries with very limited resources, they were not able to cope with anything under normal circumstances anyway. So they were hit worse by the COVID. And you can think of like Colombia or Venezuela as examples. Then there's another report. Again, this is looking at UK government, what we have done. UK government will probably be a subject matter for researchers of government science for a long time from now, because what our colleagues here, Gary Stoker, Will Jennings, and Jean Gaskell are claiming, UK governance system was fundamentally flawed. So, and the flaws were in three categories. Obviously, there was miscommunication, and we have seen a lot of U-turns along the way. There was definitely lack of capacity to bring, people together, organizations together, coordinate the effort. And you can think of many examples, but even testing at the early stages when Germany was, running like, 50,000 tests a day, UK was only managing to get 5,000. And this was ridiculous, because if you think about the scientific scene in the UK, in London only, there are so many, big universities with, very advanced laboratories and, testing, facilities. So even if you use one of them, you would get easily 100,000 tests done per day. But we delayed that. We weren't able to coordinate even such a simple thing. And that is also seen in distribution of resources fairly. So this is also a very controversial area, because in many countries, probably you have seen the same thing. Distribution issue is probably the heart of the problem too, because at the end of the day, when you think about it, sorry, okay, there was a message there. It kind of like flashed on my screen. Sorry for that pause. But yeah, I will share with you the presentation at the end of the webinar. So what I was saying, the resource distribution is the heart of the all governance issues around the world. It is obviously a big debate between alternative forms of government too. And perhaps I started with authoritarian and liberal approaches. I mean, there could be other ways of effective governance, and we have to get back to the drawing board and think about these, because I mean, for the sake of private sector, for the sake of economy, or private sectors running itself, we have unfortunately sacrificed tens of thousands of lives. And across the world, we are talking about millions now. That is really not acceptable and shouldn't be acceptable for many people. What happened in terms of poverty? That is the heart of the problem. The World Bank released a report recently, and they say during the pandemic, an additional 115 million, up to 115 million people joined the extreme poor. They fell under extreme poverty. Extreme poverty, and they are expecting by 2021, that is now we are in, this to reach 150 million. That is additional 150 million. And as you see at the bottom half of the screen, UNICEF, for another report, they said children poverty will soar to approximately 1.2 billion. That is like, can you imagine 1.2 billion? I mean, in the world, we have 7.4 billion people altogether, and about half are children. And UNICEF is practically telling us 1/3 of those will be in poverty, that is extreme poverty. And they will not have access to education, health, housing, nutrition, sanitation, or water, just to put it in a more starking scale. In the UK government, working with, their various partners, I should say, Legatum Institute is one of them, a conservative think tank. And again, in their report, they claimed there were nearly 700,000 new poor in the UK. That means 700 more people fell into poverty. So that's like, line of poverty. So they don't have enough to eat. They don't have enough to shelter themselves. And they also said working people were falling into faster. So that's more desperate if you can think about it. Even if you work, you will not be able to lift yourself out of poverty. And of course, young workers hit worse and children suffer more. The message is always almost clearly along these lines. And I'm reading you the right wing or more liberal views of the spectrum. On the other hand, you have more, depressing stories shared and worse predictions and projections coming up. But we have also seen the exposure. I mean, like infection does not come, class blind. So poor people, working class people, people struggling, they have faced more of the infection, like they would face any infection, any disaster worse than others anyway. So we have seen the same scenario happening, 10 years ago when we had the global financial crisis. So it was similarly affected the working classes, especially lower end of the spectrum, worse than anybody else. So same thing happens here. I mean, we had lockdowns, we had containments. So what happened is, we are probably lucky as academics because we were able to work from home. We were able to, to be shed aside and stay relatively safe. But many others who work in other sectors, like construction industry, never closed, never shut down. They continued working. And many people forced to work as well because UK government was so reluctant to call for lockdowns, and they even encourage people to go to offices and work, or workplaces. And this has encouraged people to, obviously made them more exposed to the risks. And we have seen that. So what we have seen, therefore, poverty and deprivation become deeper and wider. More people fell into poverty, and more people more they suffered at the end of that, economic, socioeconomic spectrum. And these are the numbers and messages and reports about the UK. So don't forget, UK is probably about the top end of Gini index. If you look at other countries falling further down, I mean, within OECD, at least we know, for example, that's about 29 countries we are talking. The difference between the income levels of the top 10% and the bottom 10%. In the UK, it is about 10 times, if I'm not mistaken. In Germany, it's about 6 times. And many countries outside the OECD and lower ranks of the World Bank's income level scales, they would have much worse inequalities. And in those places, I can imagine the impact of COVID in terms of increasing poverty and deprivation would be much harder, much harsher. So we shouldn't read what I am saying here, sharing here, as kind of like average of everything. It is not. This is probably one of the best pictures, I mean, if you can call it best, we can think of. But overall, we are looking at much deep end of the of the unfortunate, disastrous picture around the world. So I will try to link this to the employment scale. I assume among our audience, we have some younger colleagues and some students, maybe graduates or others who would be interested in what is the impact on employment, how it is working on. So one thing is, obviously all of us are kind of like celebrating, oh, it is the digital era now, suddenly arrived. Yes, it is. It happened. We are going to see more and more activities happening online, like our seminar here. Of course, this is a benefit. And I would be, it would be almost impossible for me to travel, to Cairo and do a, 1 hour talk and come back, even under normal circumstances. And it would, cost us a lot of carbon footprint and a lot of, flight tickets, etc., etc. And so it would also cost your institute, unfortunately, because I would charge them. Joking, but this is a benefit. We understand that. However, on the other side, what happens is, like, higher education institutions, many universities around the UK, US, and around the world, they at first they were forced to do online because there was no other means. And you have to keep going, you have to do something, some for money, some for, public good. And we all plunged into that, digital learning, online learning, distance learning. Suddenly we were all asked by our institutions to take videos with our smart, not so smart phones and post them on our Blackboards or YouTubes, whatever, Microsoft Teams, and do classes as if we are Hollywood, stars. Of course, we are not. I mean, this was my job early on last year in March and April. I mean, Tarantino is shooting a movie, and spending like $50 million, then winning quite a few prizes here and there. And even then, when you sit down after half an hour, you look around what to drink, what to eat, you get bored. And what will you do with Ibrahim Sirkeci for 90 minutes? I mean, it's just insane. I mean, nobody can keep anybody in a room, like, and our classes, don't forget, they are like 3 hours, 4 hours. I even have some classes like 6 hours. I mean, seriously, even face-to-face, 6 hours is a crime. I mean, if I were in charge, I would, put myself in prison. Anyway, so that is the part of the story that is like, forced benefits of it. But at the same time, we already had, for example, in higher education and some other sectors, a push towards digitalization and flexible working. So this crisis made it probably permanent and more structural. So we will not see ourselves as academics or other office-based, workers getting back to office as fully as we were before. There will be a kind of like, mixed form of work pattern. So we will continue working from distance. We will use more of these online platforms and resources to do what we are doing. And of course, on parallel, we also have developments and progress in AI, artificial intelligence, that will play in. I have already played with some, some apps that, it kind of like projects your writing actually onto screen. Somebody looking much better than myself and speaking much better than myself, just reading what I am writing, and it is quite convincing. So we will get to that kind of places. But that is also coming at an expense. I mean, obviously, what we have also seen, the face-to-face has a value that cannot be fully replaced by what is virtual. So now we are having this meeting. For example, I have read quite a few articles about the psychological effects, the friction our body and mind is going through when we have online meetings. So when I have a meeting, obviously my body is sending a message telling me that, we are having a meeting. And meeting means, in our old world, really meeting. So you are expecting smell, you are expecting touch, you are expecting that, energy is coming together in a room, and you are expecting to see somebody from head to toe, so you can gossip about their shoes, whatever. So that is the expectation of your body and mind. But suddenly you go into a room and you are looking at a black screen. And, in most cases, still in my classes, I see students don't turn on their cameras. So you are talking to a black wall and then saying, goodbye, I'm going. It is obviously causing quite a lot of tension in our psychology. So the long-term effects of that will be calculated later on, but it is definitely there. And unfortunately, the way I feel, it is not good either. But what also COVID did teach us in this regard, the value of face-to-face. So many of our students are not happy with online instructions. So they like it in a way, it gives some flexibility, but they demand what we have in face-to-face. Okay, that is part of the story. So there will be that kind of shift in terms of employment. But more important shift is precarity. So that flexibility practically pushes for precarity. Now I am also, in a way, a precarious worker because I work for 4 universities, and total, size of these contracts is probably 1/3 of a full-time contract. But, I do what I do for passion as well. So that is already taking my full time. So it is never 30%. So when you have a part-time contract on flexible terms, that's like you can work wherever you like, whenever you like, is practically means you have to work, forever and all the time. So it does only change your remuneration, what you are paid. So we have to think about this, and we have to find ways around, again, a fair distribution. That is a distribution issue more than anything else. So I will try to wrap it up in a minute. What I do expect in the short run, I should say, of course, expecting worse. Because why? Because I am a demographic pessimist. So I expect the worst. If it goes better than I expect, then I can be happy. We can be happy. That's the strategy. So there is definitely a decline in human rights, and that decline is, perhaps you can, at least some of you may remember what happened when we had the 9/11 New York bombings. And after that, we have seen a lot of security measures put in place, like airport, controls, security controls increased, passport controls increased, visa regimes became tighter. So COVID will have a similar effect. Now, obviously, in most countries, if not all, putting your mask is compulsory. You can't travel without masks. That's end of the face era. You will have perhaps, wonderfully decorated masks, but there will be masks when you travel. And it is just one side of the story, because that is how the bureaucracy works. I mean, it regenerates and reproduces and exponentially grows itself. So we will see more and more measures as such coming in place. Longer queues at securities, longer queues at any travel facility, etc., and more restrictions. Now in the UK, just last week they passed a new law giving police more force, more powers to stop demonstrations and so on. So that we will see, unfortunately, more of that. And perhaps, outside Europe, we will see worse and more of those coming through as well. So we will also see a further and more brutal restrictions on human mobility. Visa regimes will get tighter, and those who travel will see how it affects our lives. But we will see flights getting more expensive. Now the UK government definitely, but other governments are considering too. They are talking about vaccination passports. So as if we don't have enough paperwork, we will have just one more. And that is the end of my talk. Now it is your turn. Thank you very much. I am open to all comments and questions, guys.
Professor Ibrahim, thank you very much for an amazing, insightful, and very much of a specific presentation on the new normal that we are living in. And before opening the floor for the chat and the questions, I would like to highlight a few points. First of all, as I was just saying in advance, that we're very honored to have you. The background knowledge that you presented today, it's not only covering the title of the presentation, but it's opening an insightful arena for more points of research for the future. And if I want to comment, I would comment that in times of crisis, like in the COVID-19, which is the crisis of all time to our generation at least, the pandemic has greatest repercussions on economic and social boundaries, on mobility, on agile concepts, agility of migration strategy. And the public governance would matter more than ever. And the governance arrangements nowadays are playing a critical role, like you have highlighted, in the significance of the country's immediate responses. Will they continue to be crucial for this recovery, to building the new normal? Will they continue with the advocation of the vaccine passports? How they are going to, be specific on these permits to cross borders? This is one thing. The other thing, if I will highlight on your points actually about the rate of poverty, 700,000 new poor in UK is quite a significant figure for a country like the United Kingdom. 115 million joining extreme poverty line is another thing. The Jerry Stocker from London School of Economics underlined the importance of effective communication in addressing the pandemic. Your recommendations in the last slide, and if we can add more recommendations about the human mobility. What about the health system? Are we going to strengthen the development of the emergency response system? What about the budgeting in several countries? It's actually a further research point that we will be all going to our offices next week, having some of your presentation slides, just throwing a pen and just thinking about points of possible areas of more and more research. As you were just saying, the ways that COVID-19 is now a governance crisis, and bad governance is reflecting on everything. Usually in public administration, we say that good governance affects the triple bottom line in terms of social, environmental, economic performance of the organization. What about the repercussions of a changing world with a bad governance? What started as one-dimensional health crisis now is quickly turning into a socio-economic, humanitarian, and political crisis around the world. We thought that there are some remote areas away from the virus, but now you can find that Latin America and the Caribbean is no exception. And it's falling, and it's rather becoming the epicenter of the epidemic. We thought it's going to be in Asia only when China started, and this is just far away like the SARS. But then it's coming and it's hitting every single aspect. And by some of the perspectives of some Latin American writings and throw some of the points that were used in some of the research related to the title of 7 Ways Now a Governance Crisis, talking about reversing tensions are necessary measures that would be implemented in the future. I have to emphasize the importance of information, both on the economic importance of the crisis. How many nations good governance, the practice, the in having reaching every single strata of the society in every single nation. What about the poor people? What about strengthening the controls on abuse of authority and corruption? Your graph was so much alarming, and ensuring that transparency will be reflected in good governance practices and so on and so forth. So basically, I think that it's not only the governance of the epidemic. People might, authorities might learn to be the epidemic itself when it comes to governance practices. And I do remember when the Prime Minister of the British Prime Minister said at the beginning in March, you can start saying goodbye to your loved ones. No one believed him, but it turned a fact. And on my personal self, I said goodbye to a very dear loved one, and it's ongoing. And this is basically, if I want to wrap up on the discussion, but definitely the floor is open for you, is open for everyone. And even Dr. Rania was asking that if you can reflect on some specific research points that we can share out of the presentation, we will be very grateful. And I would be handing the floor to you for a quick comment. Then I will be opening the discussion for the coming 20 minutes for all the staff members. And let me again thank everyone who joined the platform today. So, and we have few hands raised up also. So if you want to comment, or would you like us to take the hands up first?
Yeah, I mean, you have highlighted, quite an important, set of issues that I touched upon. Maybe it is like, I can talk forever. It is better to give the floor to these colleagues raising hand and sure. See where we are heading. Then I can reflect on all of them at once.
Okay.
By the way, I already emailed the presentation to you, to your email address. So
okay. And I will be responsible, yes. Myself and Dr. Rania, we will be responsible to disseminate it among staff members. Let me thank our Vice Dean for Teaching and Learning. She is here, and we'll be very happy to hear from her. And I have Dr. Ola Mamdouh has her hand up. Please go ahead, Dr. Ola.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Zeinab, very much. Thank you, Dr. Rania, for inviting Professor Ibrahim for this very informative and interesting session. It's a hot topic, and I think as Professor Ibrahim, you have just mentioned the governance of the pandemic and how there was somehow somehow a poor governance, as Dr. Zeinab also said, that a lot of countries thought that it will not reach us. However, I think now, and I have gone through a recent reading about even the governance of the vaccine distribution, that still after the vaccine is already produced now, to distribute the vaccine, and with the cold chain that the vaccine has to be in with certain conditions, and to go to the different countries, the barcoding that they use, sometimes it's only for a secondary level, not for the single dose that is specified for a certain patient. And of course, this would affect how we would monitor the adverse effects that might happen to certain patients, whether maybe a certain adverse effect was caused due to a defect in the drug, or is it something in the batch, or is it something in the storage, or whether maybe it is something related to the patient factors. So I think there were some defects in the governance of the pandemic, as well as up to the moment even there is somehow some difficulties that are being faced with companies that have produced the vaccine regarding the distribution of the vaccine worldwide. Do you think to what extent would this affect the people taking the vaccine, and even as of course have you heard that in a lot of other places people even are somehow reluctant to take the vaccine? So what do you think about the governance regarding the vaccine of the distribution of the vaccine, as well as the reluctancy of some countries and some population to take the vaccine?
Thank you, Dr. Mamdouh, isn't it?
Yes,
Dr.
yes, Ola Mamdouh, yes, thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. Actually, you really hit the heart of it, because this is the reason why I raise and underline the issue of distribution more than anything else several times in my talk. But that should be really, that should be the main dish for everybody: researchers, politicians, journalists, whoever. Students. It is like, you're right. When there's a corruption means like pretty much it is like an endemic. It is a pandemic actually. So it affects bad governance. Is not unique to government per se. It's not the parliament or cabinet. It is everywhere. It is governance of course, health systems, governance of testing, governance of vaccines. And you know it very well. Unfortunately and interestingly, Middle East kind of like is full of people who love to believe in conspiracies, but nobody can blame them because there is so much to play into these conspiracies. Yes. I hear people talking about, like in Turkey, they are injecting people with water, so instead of real vaccine. So I don't think it's true, but there is a reason for people to develop all these unbelievable, sometimes stupid conspiracies. But it is important to remember, it is always about a distribution issue. This is the heart of political science, political economy, isn't it? You have to address the distribution issue. When you look at the vaccine world now, think about it. Now there's Chinese vaccine. I don't really remember the name of the brand. Sorry for my racism.
Yes.
But we
Sinopharm, the Chinese one, Sinopharm.
Yeah. Sinopharm. Yeah. And then we have Pfizer, BioNTech, and AstraZeneca. This must be a joke. AstraZeneca vaccine has been developed by my academic colleagues, researchers at Oxford University, which is funded by government. It is a public institution running on public money. So it is my tax, and anybody else's taxes. But now we have the vaccine, and we say thanks to AstraZeneca. It is why our governments are unable to just ask their own institution, like Oxford University, to develop a vaccine. We are paying the money anyway. Why we are on the way? We are making a pharmaceutical company richer than ever. This is what will happen to AstraZeneca. Their shares will go through the roof, and they will probably overtake Google. Why we are unable, or why Germany is not able? Germany invested in last 2-3 decades into those Max Planck research centers. These are all, like every one of them, $1 million, euros invested in to develop these things. And yet 2 doctors there, developing it for BioNTech, Pfizer. So it is just insane. People need to ask these questions. I mean, the researchers, scientists need to investigate and, highlight what is going wrong here. And perhaps police should investigate and highlight what is going corrupt there, because there is no other explanation. Why can't you put, like, you have this coming. You had the evidence. We had the evidence by as early as February. Thousands of people were dying in Italy. So we couldn't, from that point onward, you can't say it is too far away to us, So it was at your door and we knew what was going on. And we were still not able to say, okay, like, we have those 5,000 microbiologists working in various public universities. Come on, guys, sit down, leave everything else. There's no teaching to do. Just do that vaccine, And that is corruption. That is bad governance, if you ask me, my opinion. But instead, we let it to Pfizer or AstraZeneca to do something. And at the end, we are celebrating because AstraZeneca will make billions of dollars out of this, or Pfizer will do even more because it's an American firm. I mean, so I agree with you. I mean, that's really important issue, but that is, a political, action point. B, a scientific action point. I mean, we have to outline, we have to show why this is bad governance and how it can be rectified, because this is not sustainable.
Yeah, I think that you will continue definitely the chat with Dr. Ola Mamdouh, is the head of the sustainability unit at the CIGGE Center under my direction, and she just won the Young Investigator Fund for her topic related to these health issues. And I think you should have a more and more into-depth research. Dr. Ola with Dr. Ibrahim will be giving the contacts of Dr. Ibrahim very soon, Professor Ibrahim, of course, very soon. And I have another raised hand from Dr. Sheikh. Dr. Sheikh, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zeinab. So thank you very much, Professor Ibrahim, and thank you, Dr. Rania, for this nice evening session. So actually, I was thinking about something that is little different. That is, we had been talking about accountability. We had been talking about governance. So actually, we missed out something, that is World Health Organization. What they are doing, I'll say that is a complete failure case in terms of forecasting, in terms of handling the issue, in terms of research, in terms of distribution of vaccine. So all these issues, if you see, they actually, what the member countries of United Nations, they do. They donate huge amount of money every year to United Nations. That's how they are actually running the organization. But what happened, every week, they give some statistics, they give some lecture in media, that's it. So what they're doing, we don't find them at all. How do you see, Professor, this thing about World Health Organization?
Thank you, Dr. Sheikh. I mean, this is, again, it falls under bad governance. It's just at a higher level, supranational bad governance. So World Health Organization is unfortunately very similar to United Nations. They have very big constitutions, but very little sanctioning power. Like, I mean, if you follow what UN is doing around the world, or not doing, perhaps we should better say, because they have these top table countries, 7 of them. And when any one of them says no to something, they can't do anything. And this is repeating itself over and over every time and against every crisis. And World Health Organization is not so different. It is similar to UNHCR too, similar to IOM. It comes closer to our migration research world, but same problem. I mean, I wouldn't particularly blame the guy in charge of WHO. Probably he has so many bosses telling him not to do many things. And but the organization itself, I think, corrupt. I mean, corrupt in a sense that, you know, they can't sanction anything, because when you don't have sanctioning power, or, you know, 100% commitment from members, you can't really act. It's like, you know, in this room, we are, what, 28 people here, 27 now. So we are accepting the authority of Zeinab and, you know, and me as an invited speaker, and we follow a simple set of rules. So this is our sanctioning power. Sanctioning power here is Zeinab can kick you out of the room or mute you. So you're out. You have the sanctioning power. And also we are very loyal, humble servants in this little game. So we don't riot against. But WHO doesn't have any of these powers. I mean, they just say, oh, shame on you, if they are lucky. You know, they can't say that even. So even if you can't say that, then, you know, what can you do? I mean, you don't have really anything to organize yourself or, you know, do something. And there are a lot of records are coming on. And I think the answer is going to be found in those. Like from around the world, like there are so many private organizations like NGOs, but also local governments, you know, and more so individuals putting themselves at risk and doing a lot of wonderful stuff, trying to rectify whatever they can do. Like there are people collecting, you know, food, preparing food boxes and distributing them to, you know, the poorest segments of the society, community, wherever they are living. And the problem is I have seen so many of those so far. And the problem is that is not enough. I mean, charity is not the answer. That's the problem. That's the reality we have to see. Charity, unfortunately, is not the answer. I mean, if it was the answer, we wouldn't see that much poverty in the Muslim world as well. I mean, like you have zakat, you know, sadaqah. So why you still have millions, hundreds of millions, you know, in poverty in those countries like Indonesia, Nigeria, etc. So, or Turkey, I mean, you have homeless people. So that's the bottom line. Unfortunately, you know, with organizations like WHO, it is bad governance by design. That's important to see.
Now, I think if I can relate to Dr. Sheikh inquiry as well, is that the bad governance about these organizations is that they publish. If you Google, you will find all the sites browsing the United Nations contributions tackling coronavirus. And the titles are responding to COVID-19. The rules of good governance apply now. And another title, evidence-based policy responses for a sustainable recovery. And you can find millions of things on the internet talking about public trust, risk governance, crisis management, open digitalization and data, and use information for everyone, regulations, sanctions. But then at the end of the day, like you're saying, Professor Ibrahim, that it is a bad governance after all, because it's not tackling a fair distribution at the end of the day. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Sheikh, for your comment. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Professor Ibrahim. Thank you very much, Dr. Zeinab.
Thank you.
More questions on the floor? Or yes, Dr. Nikos from our political science department. Go ahead. Very happy that, you're joining. Thank you very much.
No, you're very much welcome. It was a very interesting talk indeed. No, what I would like to ask is more of like the professor's take on the policies, for instance, in the UK or other European countries, more importantly in the UK, because I understand he's UK based. So what do you think is going to be the impact of like COVID with regards to what looked like before the pandemic, the kind of like acceleration of the privatization of the NHS, especially in England? Do you think that the current, the situation that we find ourselves in the last year and a half, and the amount of public support that perhaps the NHS has received will kind of like stop or create an obstacle for the Tory government to try and sell out the NHS? Or do you think that they will find a way to privatize or perhaps start selling pieces and pieces to the many American companies that were looking to get into the NHS this last decade at least.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nikos. That is, in the UK health system, NHS actually has been sold out piece by piece, not even piece by piece, maybe wholesale, since the Tony Blair's governments. So actually since Margaret Thatcher, but Blair was really and Gordon Brown, key people to accelerate that. And Tory government, of course, more willing to do so, more willing to sell more. And my wife is an NHS doctor, so I also have a bit of a first-hand knowledge what is going on in practice. The way I see it, first thing, the NHS became, like many British organizations, became very bureaucratic and administrative heavy organization. You have more managers than doctors and nurses in NHS. So, I mean, I can blame myself a little bit, perhaps as a professor in a business and management school for the last 20 years. These are all our graduates messing it up, perhaps. But at the end of the day, this is what it is. And at the front end, it looks public. But at the back end, there is already a lot of privatization took place, already established. And I expect what you suggest will continue happening. It will be more and more privatized. And now, as we are outside EU as well, we are not controlled by EU authorities, directives, and good controls, I should say, to an extent. And we will go even wilder in terms of selling NHS to perhaps mostly American corporations, and it will happen. We are seeing in local news as well, like GP practices are taken over by some conglomerations, accumulating into a smaller number of companies. So this seems to continue. NHS stuff obviously during the COVID gained a lot of public support. It already had a lot of public support. People really love and respect NHS in the UK. I do as well, but I am a bit biased because my wife works there. But at the end of the day, there was already a lot of that. And what happened is just last week, actually, or maybe 10 days now, Chancellor announced that NHS staff will get 1% pay rise. So that is like showing the intentions of government, if you want to, because 1% against the inflation in a crisis situation is a joke. So it shows how much respect government shows for NHS. And unfortunately, we will see more of that decline going on, and more privatization will come.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's an interesting and scary take. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for your insightful chat and question, and it's a very useful session. So let me invite, if we can have Professor Hadia for a comment, a final comment, and then Dr. Rania Khalil would advise us, please, to turn on the cameras if we can, because we need a group photo for the session. So if we can all do this, and anyone who is in charge of taking the photos can go ahead. And if Professor Hadia can enlighten our floor, our Vice Dean for Teaching and Learning at the Faculty of BUE.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Zain. Thank you, Rania. Thank you very much, Professor Sirkeci. I hope I'm saying it right, for this enlightening session.
Yes.
We are honored to have you here with us. I must say I'm a little bit not skeptical, but this information you gave us, it gave me the impression that we are really heading towards more challenging times somehow. I know that this is how it is, but sometimes the truth is kind of enervating a little, because you know it, but you don't want to have it said so bluntly in front of you. But I must say, you covered many aspects, starting from the whole the virus and how it started in China, and actually you gave a very objective view. A view that we are not really getting from the media around the world, from the Western media in general, which I think is something that is needed, that we are aware of the different points of view and how to look at this circumstances that are occurring, and to look into the future and kind of have a feel of what's going on. It's of course concerning to know about the poverty, about all the suffering that is going on and will continue to go on, it seems, for some time. However, on the good side or the bright side is that we as academics, as you mentioned, we are having a way out, and we are really using the facilities we have in the best way possible. And we are fortunate that we are able to maintain our work and reach our students and reach our audience, which is of course something very important. But still, we will just have to wait and see. That's what I can say. But thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Rania, also very much for organizing this. This is really a very nice international perspective that we all need. I'm really very happy with the activities of the Irish Centre, and I'm very happy about the collaboration between two centers of the university. I think this is what it should be all about, to engage and to have a dialogue between all of us. I think this is really very useful, and this is how academia should be all about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Hadia. If no one else has any questions to ask, we can wrap the session and present our gratefulness and thanks to Professor Ibrahim.
Thank you very much, guys. It was really a pleasure being here. Thank you for organizing this, and I enjoyed being with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Rania, thank you very much for this opportunity. Professor Hadia, thank you very much for being with us today. And I would like to thank all the top management at the faculty of BAPS and on the BUE in general. I will also thanking very much our Dean of the Faculty, Professor Wadouda Badran, the greatest support that we have from our head of department and from all our top management at the faculty. I would like to thank both research centers. Actually, Dr. Rania is doing a great effort in combining these sessions. And thank you very much, Professor Ibrahim, for your time and for all the insightful and informative session and information that you have given us today. Thank you.
I would like to wrap up the seminar by saying thank you, first of all, to Professor Ibrahim Sirkeci for accepting my invitation for this research seminar. Thank you so much for your time, for the knowledge you've shared with us this evening, for the insightful discussion and the commentary, and for all the questions you've answered. I also would like to thank Dr. Zeinab Younis for agreeing to moderate this seminar. Your comments and your feedback and your insights on the discussion has been extremely valuable. Last but not least, I'd like to thank Professor Hadia Fakhruddin, because she coordinated this internally with me, and she made this happen. Last but again not least, in an overall sense, I'd like to thank the Faculty of Business Administration, Economics and Political Science at the British University in Egypt. And I'd also like to thank again the Research Centre for Innovation, Governance and Green Economy. Thank you as well to all our attendees, and have a wonderful evening and enjoy the rest of your weekend.